Joel Klatt back here on the show. How are you, Joel?
What's up? How are you, man?
What was it like in the stadium yesterday? Saturday.
You know,
what was it like?
are you familiar with Chappelle's show?
Of course.
Right. You remember the line from the Chappelle show, if you have hate in your heart, let it out. That's what this feels like, right? I mean, like, that's what this feels like. And I got to tell you, like, I love it. I love it. I love this sport, right? I love college football. And these types of rivalries are what I love most. Now, some people don't like them, and they want to, they want squeaky clean, and they want handshakes and back rubs after the game. This is what makes it great. Candidly, Rich, we don't have this in professional sports anymore. We just don't. Vitriol to this extent. We don't have Lakers Celtics. I mean, we don't really even have this whole Red Sox-Yankees series this postseason. I mean, did you feel anything like we felt when Don Zimmer was getting thrown to the ground? Of course not.
No,
right?
I know.
Like, this is awesome. Like, I think we should appreciate it. And I don't want to take sides. I think I can see both people's arguments. I was standing in the booth when this happens. Okay, so you know how early you get there for a game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up there just reading over a lot of my notes, and I'm going to go down to the field a little bit later after all the teams get there, and Michigan State comes out, and I can tell they're like all lining up across the end zone, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I knew that they did their walk, but I gotta tell you, I thought they were late as well, just based on when they arrived. It was less than 2 hours from kick. Generally, buses arrive and guys start coming out to the field or first get to the locker room about 2 hours and 15, 2 hours and 20 minutes before kick. So when they came out, I thought, candidly, in my head, I was like, oh, this is interesting. They're a little late. I saw some guys from Michigan down on the field, and from up there, I couldn't tell exactly who they were. So I get on the talk back, and I tell my director, I'm like, hey, who are those guys down there? And so now all our camera guys start getting in position. They start flying around and zooming around. And so we're in position far sooner than we're going to be, right? And sure enough, there's Devin Bush, and we had cameras all over it. And, the Michigan guys are like, hey, I'm not moving. And the Michigan State guys are like, well, we're not going to break our arms or whatever. And so there was this altercation, and it happens right in front of Mark D'Antonio, right in front of him.
Right. So how can again, obviously, I have an emotional tie to this thing, but I'm more than happy to call out, or more than professional to call out, Michigan if it's deserved. But how can D'Antonio call the description BS if he literally was walking past in between the two Michigan guys, one of whom was Bush, when there was something going on. He was right there.
Yeah, I think what he was calling, I think the way I read it is that the insinuation was that he was smiling and laughing at the altercation, and I think that's what he said was BS, but I mean, I don't know what he was smiling at. He seemed to have a grin. He tends to have a wry smile.
I don't have Joel. I don't have a problem if he is smiling over the fact that these kids are getting after it and that they are amidst a rivalry, and he knows that something's getting stirred up. I mean, as you pointed out, this is what the rivalry is about. I mean, but to not own it then afterwards is a little bit bizarre. I don't know what look, I don't want to put you in a position because you call these games and you speak to these coaches.
I don't know what he was smiling about. I mean, candidly, it's a little easier for us to get a beat on and chat with Mark D'Antonio than it is Jim Harbaugh, so I feel like I know Mark more than I know Jim. They're both really
I love that.
Both really passionate guys.
Right.
Let me tell you that I would have no problem sending my son to play for either gentleman. So there you go.
I was tweeting out.
I don't mind if Mark was laughing at it. Great.
Yeah, I know.
I don't mind.
And he's a hell of a coach. I was tweeting out about that, the way that he wrapped up that game against Penn State, the way that game wrapped up, where he decided to boot it away, defend, get the ball back, and try and score. And he still had a timeout in his back pocket. He didn't even use it.
McSorley left him a timeout because he ran out of bounds. Yeah, listen, this guy's a great coach, and I'll defend him, to any extent. And Listen, but again, this is what I love about it. This just means that I pray that we get this game again next year because I thought it was fantastic. I really did. The only thing that I thought got a little out of hand is I thought that the officials were way too close to the vest with all their unsportsmanlike penalties. Candidly, I mean they were handing them out like Halloween candy, and I didn't think that was warranted. Having said that, they're going to do what they're going to do. I thought it was a great game. Michigan State was clearly overmatched and outmanned, and in large part due to the fact that they had so many injuries. The injuries were decimating their football team, and Michigan's not dealing with anywhere near the amount of injuries that Michigan State is, although two of their better, if not the best two players on their team were not playing. Tariq Black was not back yet at wide receiver, and Rashawn Gary was not playing at defensive end. So, but I will say, and I know I'm going off in a little different direction, but Rich,
go for it.
I believe what I said during the broadcast, and I was speaking to Michigan fans. I think you guys have been waiting since late 90s to hear that it's real. And I think it was kind of real 2 years ago, and you were in a position to maybe beat Ohio State and go to the Big Ten championship and then compete for a playoff spot. But this feels different to me. It feels more well-rounded. I feel like it's a better team. I feel like the weakest link of the team right now is still quarterback play, and yet he's got a lot of room for growth, and there's a lot of potential there because he's still a very skilled player in Shea Patterson. And that's what this is real for Michigan. I think that they're absolutely the favorite in the Big Ten. I felt that before last week. I was saying that on several different outlets, and Ohio State proved me right because I saw them 2 weeks ago. They've got a lot of holes, and right now Michigan's the best team in the Big Ten. And I think if they win the conference with only one loss, they're going to be in the college football playoff.
Well, I want to get to that in a second. Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. What is wrong with Ohio State? I mean, how did Saturday night develop based on what you just said when you saw them a couple weeks ago, Joel?
Yeah, exactly how they have been playing of late. And namely, there's only one thing that they're doing at an elite level, which is throwing the football. And you can't win like that. There's a reason, as much as he would bristle at this, there's a reason that Mike Leach has never even won his own division, Rich. There's a reason. Because in this sport, you still have to be a complete team to win championships, whether that's a division championship, a conference championship, or a national championship. All these passing numbers are all well and good. They're all well and good. But what does it come down to? To beat Georgia, to beat a team like Alabama or Clemson or even Oklahoma, what do you got to do? Control the game on the ground. There's a reason Georgia beat Oklahoma last year. So if that's the only thing you can do, you've got major issues. And right now, Ohio State's not playing quality defense. They're losing the rushing game battle on almost a game-in, game-out basis, in particular yards per rush. They're giving up way too many big plays. In fact, last week coming into that game against Purdue, they had given up 22 plays of 30 or more yards, which was sixth worst in college football. Their man coverage is not quite as good on that defensive side, and they cannot run the ball. That was their fourth straight game. They averaged under 3 yards per carry. That's a huge line of demarcation. Just to give you a sense of how important that 3 yards per carry is, Michigan under Jim Harbaugh is 34-0 when they average 3 yards or more per carry during a game. They're 0-12 when they average under that 3 yards per carry per game. So it is a major, major thing, and Ohio State is not doing it very well. And the thing that is alarming a lot of people is that their 5 offensive linemen would probably start pretty much everywhere in the country. You know, if you took the 5 offensive linemen they're playing against at Purdue and their 5 offensive linemen, you would take all 5 of the Ohio State offensive linemen well before you would take any 5 of the Purdue offensive linemen, and that's why it's so alarming for people.
Well, when you saw Urban, I mean, Dan Patrick had a chat with Herb Street earlier, and they echoed what a lot of people are talking about, that he doesn't look right, literally physically, that whatever went down with him and the inquiry, whatever might be ailing him to cause him to take that medication that affects his memory, according to the inquiry's findings. Did you find Urban okay based on what when you saw him?
I felt like there was something there. I think that the week before we had him, remember, he went down to a knee middle of the game with that headache and had to be attended to. And and when I went in and saw them that next week, I saw him on Thursday. He said he was doing okay, that he's got to take, the medication, and he doesn't like taking the medication. When I saw him on Friday, it wasn't the same Urban that I meet with on a week in, week out basis. Well, when I go in there on Fridays, it just wasn't the same. When you can tell when someone's sitting in front of you and they've got something physically bothering them, there's some pain. And you could tell, and he even, rubbed his head a couple of times and was squinting a little bit more than I thought he was, or than he normally is. So, yeah, I think that there's some truth to that. And certainly Kirk, knows that program and knows him exceptionally well. And I saw it the same as Kirk has.
A couple more things left with Joe Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, I'm going to hit you with what I kind of hot-taked at the second hour with LSU and Alabama playing each other. Why wouldn't it benefit Alabama to lose this game? Because that would take them maybe out of an SEC championship appearance against either Georgia or Florida, and then they could one-loss their way into the Final Four, because how are they going to keep Alabama out of it? Seriously. And the fact that Michigan goes on this run, like you just witnessed, and potentially, it's a big if, beat Penn State, beat Ohio State, they got to face Wisconsin again. I know you've got that game, so that there are business interests a little bit here, but what are we doing here with these championship contests, Joe?
I agree wholeheartedly with what your sentiment is. My sentiment has always been that we should reward only teams that win their conference championship. I thought that this playoff in its creation was totally undermined by the SEC in its creation, and quite frankly, the rest of the country had to a little bit bow to the SEC, because the SEC was not going to agree to a playoff, period. They weren't going to be involved, Rich, unless it was the four best versus the four most deserving. As soon as you say four most deserving, you can say that you have to win your conference championship in order to be considered by the playoff committee. That's the only fix that we need in this whole thing. It creates much more value and importance last year on a game like the Iron Bowl, because last year's Iron Bowl didn't matter at all. In fact, it penalized Auburn because they had to go and then play Georgia in a game that ultimately meant nothing. Right. If you're Georgia, how is that fair? You have to go and play an extra game against a team that already beat you to get yourself into the playoff. I've felt that for a long time. 2 years ago, and this is not just an Alabama argument, I argued that Penn State should have gone ahead of Ohio State, because Ohio State didn't even win their own division, and they should not have been involved in the playoff. So the playoff is broken, and in your sentiment, I believe you're right. I don't think that they would keep Alabama out of the playoff. Here's the only thing that I would say is that their strength of schedule outside of this LSU game is really bad, really bad. And there is some talk, because remember, and God rest his soul, Mike Slive, who's no longer with us and was a terrific commissioner, he was the one that pushed and pushed and pushed for four best teams. And now there's more momentum. There's more of kind of a backing for the commissioners that are in the, let's say, the Big Ten with Jim Delaney, and the Big 12 with Bob Bowlesby, and the Pac-12 with Larry Scott, where they are behind closed doors urging the committee to honor conference championships even more so than they were supposed to in the past. Remember, they were supposed to allow a non-champion in. They were supposed to be unequivocally better, and they've very seriously towed that line with what I think are some falsities in the last couple of years. So I do think that we're going to get back to a point this year where we're going to honor conference champions more than we will just teams that we can say via the eye test that we think they're the four best.
Or we add four more, make it 8, and it's an automatic bid for whoever wins their conference championship game. So a team like Wisconsin still has a path to make the national championship round, and those conference championship games actually matter. How about that, Joel?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the minority. I don't like that at all. I think that's the real. I think that's the wrong way to go, because as soon as you have automatic berth, then all of a sudden the non-conference means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So those games are devalued to zero, and they're only valued in hindsight once you have the two teams that you're considering, or three teams that you're considering for some sort of at-large bid. I don't want hindsight games mattering. I want games mattering on the field when they're played. So for me, I want to keep the playoff at one less team than we have power conferences, because I do not want automatic entries for anybody. But I do want a qualification, a prerequisite, if you will, that you have to win your conference in order to be considered for one of the 4 spots in the playoffs.
Well, I'm going to reject your well thought out unintended consequence and lock arms with my thought and just go from one end zone to the other and just steamroll, Joel. How about that? That's what I'm going to do.
Well,
on this
I'm going to put my headphones on, stand at 50, and then let's dance.
Great call with Gus as always, Joel. Thanks for the call.
I appreciate that, bud.
You got it.
Thanks, bud.
That's
Have a
Joel.
good one.
You bet. Same to you. That's Joel Klatt at Joel Klatt on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.